Right, we now come to the urgent question. Mark Francois.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for granting this urgent question. To ask the Secretary of State for Defence if he will make a statement on his plans to fund the recommendations of the Strategic Defence Review, the SDR.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are in a new era of threat and demands on defence are rising. The Strategic Defence Review sets out a vision to make Britain safer, secure at home and strong abroad. The Government has accepted all 62 recommendations that the review made, and its implementation has been delivered through a whole of UK Government effort. The DIP will deliver on the vision of the Strategic Defence Review and put right a programme that we inherited from the Conservatives that was overcommitted, underfunded and unsuited to the threats we face. It's a 10-year plan and we must get it right. But we're not waiting on the DIP to deliver. We've established the Defence Cyber Electromagnetic Command. We've launched military intelligence services and Defence Counter-Intelligence Unit, announced that the UK will purchase 12 new F-35A jets, and launched the UK Defence Innovation to streamline our innovation with a £400 million ring-fence budget. But this Labour government has done more. We've reasserted Britain's place in the world with the rebooted Lancaster House Treaty with France, signed the Lunar House Treaty with Norway and published the Defence Diplomacy Strategy. We've brought back defence exports into the MOD, with 2025 being the highest year of defence exports in 40 years, including landmark deals with Norway and Turkey. We've published the Defence Industrial Strategy with nearly £800 million to make defence an engine for growth in every corner of the United Kingdom, and we've unveiled the groundbreaking Atlantic Bastion programme to make Britain more secure from Russian undersea threats in the North Atlantic, and we've reversed that Tory privatisation that failed our armed forces, with our forces living in appalling accommodation. That's 40,000 forces families with a £9 billion programme that we can do upgrade 9 in 10 defence houses. This is a Labour government delivering for Britain and delivering for defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour's Strategic Defence Review had 3 co-authors. I'd like to ask the Minister a question about each of them in turn. Does he agree with Dr. Fiona Hill that there is a bizarre lack of urgency in government defence planning? Does he agree with General Sir Richard Barrons, a co-author of the SDR, that there is an enormous gap between where we have to be to keep the country safe and where we actually are? Or does he agree with Lord Robertson, lead author of the SDR, former Labour Defence Secretary and distinguished former NATO Secretary-General, that the Prime Minister has shown a corrosive complacency towards defence? All of these strong words have been spoken in the past 48 hours. This is no coincidence. The authors obviously understand the principles of combined arms manoeuvre. The truth is, Labour's rhetoric on defence simply does not match the financial reality. We know that in the last financial year, the MOD was forced to make £2.6 billion of crippling in-year cuts. It's now been reported that in this financial year, they're being asked to find a further £3.5 billion on top. That would be catastrophic for our armed forces. Can the Minister categorically assure the House there will be no in-year savings exercise this year? Finally, Labour's SDR published last June promised us a comprehensive 10-year defence investment plan, which is still nowhere to be seen. One Labour peer told me prior to Easter that waiting for the DIP was like waiting for Godot, except that Godot finally turned up. So can the Minister now tell the House in what month and what year Labour's much vaunted defence investment plan is actually going to be published? Or is Labour's Chancellor, who is adamantly refusing to sign it, still going to hold our armed forces to ransom? Isn't that why our Prime Minister, who resolutely refuses to overrule her, is all mouth and no trousers on defence?
Minister.
I see the armchair general is out in full force today. Deary me. Mr. Speaker, let me personally place on record again my thanks to Richard Barrons, George Robertson and Fiona Hill for the superb work they did in authoring the Strategic Defence Review. They know, more than many, the mess that his government left defence, hollowed out and underfunded defences. That's not my words, that's the words of a Tory Defence Secretary from this dispatch box admitting the failures they made with our armed forces. But look, in our first year, Labour has boosted defence spending by over £5 billion. We are now spending more on defence this year than any year under the previous Conservative government. Any year under the previous Conservative government. We will hit 2.6% in 2027, 3% in the next Parliament, and 3.5% in 2035. That's a level not seen under any one of the 14 years that him and his colleagues were in government. But let's compare to the party's record opposite. In their first 5 years of government, they cut defence spending by £12 billion. They did long-term damage to our military. They cut our number of warships by 25%, mine-hunting ships by half. They delayed the renewal of our nuclear deterrent. In the 14 years, they never hit once the 2.5% of GDP that we left them when we were last in power. And they cut troop numbers to the lowest level since Napoleon and drove down military morale with low pay and appalling military housing. We are working flat out to deliver the DIP, and we will publish it when it is ready. But, Mr. Speaker, we are doing something that was never done under the Tories. We are doing a line-by-line review of defence budgets, publishing not just an equipment plan, but on housing, on personnel, on infrastructure, all in one. This is a Labour government that is delivering for defence.
Tom Singh, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sobering is the public intervention by Lord Robertson, the former Defence Secretary and the former NATO Secretary-General, and that a man of his stature to make that assessment, I think, just shows the seriousness and the gravity of the situation. And indeed, he was the person who was tasked up by the government to head up the Strategic Defence Review. And his comments align with what the Defence Committee has been highlighting for several months now, that we are ill-prepared to face the threats that we as a nation currently are facing in a more volatile world. And that is why the government's rhetoric must align with reality, and we must ensure that we get to that 3% GDP spend on defence in this Parliament. We cannot afford to kick the can down the road to the next Parliament. Now, Minister, with regards to what the Prime Minister told me when he appeared in front of the Liaison Committee, he said that the Defence Investment Plan was on his desk and that it would be delivered very soon. Now, any further delay to the DIP would cause further damage to our defence industrial base, not to mention send the wrong signal to our allies and adversaries. So, could the Minister please confirm when will that Defence Investment Plan finally be published?
Minister.
Can I thank my more friend for his questions? He does a superb job on the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, and he is right to be asking questions of defence. It is precisely because I share many of his views that we commissioned the Strategic Defence Review in the first place, why we adopted all 62 recommendations that recommended moving our nation's military to war-fighting readiness, ending the hollowing out and underfunding that we inherited from the party opposite. That's why there's £5 billion extra in our defence budget this year already. His government cut defence when they had their first budget. We increased defence funding. That's the difference between our two parties here. But look, we're not waiting for the Defence Investment Plan, and I entirely understand the seriousness in which the House of Commons Defence Select Committee Chair raises these issues. We are announcing defence contracts. Not a day goes by without me signing off a new one. Indeed, this morning, Mr. Speaker, I was in Andover announcing the £879 million contract for maintenance of our Apache helicopters and our Chinook helicopters with Boeing, a 1,200-job contract that supports our efforts to make defence an engine for growth and give our fighting forces the very best equipment they can have.
James McCleary, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems like every day a fresh revelation about the parlous state of our military spending comes to light. After yesterday's intervention from Lord Robertson, today reports that the Chancellor is unwilling to put any more than an extra £10 billion into defence over the next 4 years, and that the Ministry of Defence is seeking £3.5 billion in cuts. Just this morning, I met with a major defence prime who outlined again how the government's failure to publish the Defence Investment Plan is undermining investment in security in this country. Unpublished plans won't keep this country safe. As Trump tears up the global order and Putin continues to brutalise Ukraine, the government can no longer delay. So will the Minister immediately take forward Liberal Democrat plans for a $20 billion defence bonds programme, enabling a rapid cash injection into capital-intensive projects outlined in the SDR? And with even the Conservatives' leader now belatedly backing our call for cross-party talks, will the government finally stop dragging its feet and convene these as a priority to create consensus on how to reach 3% of GDP spending on defence?
Well, can I thank him for his questions? Having been robust with the Conservatives opposite for the record that they left, it's worth also noting that when the Liberal Democrats were last in power, the Lib Dems cut defence spending as well, despite the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2014. So I understand the seriousness he's coming from, but I would hope he'd have some humility about his own record as well. He's absolutely right, though, that we need to increase defence spending, and that's exactly what we are doing. We'll hit 2.5% of GDP on core defence spending in April 2027, 3% in the next Parliament, 3.5% the NATO standard in 2035. But we're not waiting for the dip to get those contracts announced. Only a month ago, I announced a £1 billion helicopter deal in Yeovil with Leonardo, and I recognise the honourable gentleman for Yeovil sitting behind him here, supporting the jobs in Yeovil and across the supply chain, improving on a deal that we inherited from the Conservatives that did not have a sufficient level of UK content in the helicopter exports, did not have a security guarantee that guarantees autonomy to be based in Yeovil, and did not have Yeovil as a centre for helicopter exports. That is Labour delivering, and indeed, I think, making his Lib Dem colleague quite happy in the process.
Thank
you very much, Mr. Speaker. I genuinely respect my friend, the Shadow Minister, but seriously, the hollowing out of our defence was forged and cemented by his party's time in government. Our safety is the primary responsibility of any government, and more must be spent on our defence. However, this should not come at the expense of those pensioners and people with disabilities receiving welfare. There are always other ways. Scrap digital ID, look at some of our net zero policies, rethink some of the fiscal rules. Can I simply ask the Minister to confirm that all future funding options are being seriously considered?
Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for her question? She's absolutely right that we need to increase defence spending, and that's exactly what this government is doing. We have £5 billion extra in our budget this year, which we're using to address the hollowing out and underfunding of our armed forces that we inherited. We've used part of it to give our armed forces the biggest pay rise in 20 years, which is helping address the below inflation pay rises, if you can call them that, that was introduced by the government when the party opposite when they are in government. But I recognise the case that my honourable friend is making around the importance of defence spending, and that is one that I would encourage colleagues to still have, because we do need to increase defence spending. We are increasing defence spending, and a national conversation about the threats we face and how we match those threats with increased capability is one that I welcome, and indeed it was a recommendation in the SDR precisely to have that debate.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 6th of March, the Minister kindly allowed the Defence Select Committee into the Ministry of Defence for a secret briefing. And obviously, I would never refer to what we received in that briefing. But I do believe it is telling that the Labour-dominated Defence Committee later that day insisted on issuing a statement that we should go to 3% of GDP within this Parliament. That is this party's policy. It is the Liberal Democrat Party's policy. It's the Defence Committee's recommendation. And will he answer us now, very clearly, why he is resisting it?
Yes.
Well, can I thank him? And it's a marked change in our approach as the Ministry of Defence between governments that we want to do more with the Defence Select Committee, bringing them in even more to decision-making and understanding the situations, including providing secret briefings, which previously might not have been available in the number that we're now providing. I want to continue doing that, so I appreciate what he has to say. I recognise the case for increased defence spending. That's especially true, I'm glad he is saying so, when his party hollowed out and underfunded our forces for 14 years. I entirely understand that he is having a change of heart about his party's record in government, wanting to increase it. We'll continue to increase defence spending as we have set out.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my honourable friend assure me that this government's increased investment in our armed forces, and the Defence Investment Plan will offer huge opportunities for the defence sector in Scotland, not least at the Methil Yard in my constituency, saved from closure by Labour ministers. That will build on the huge success we've already had for the sector in Scotland, not least the £10 billion deal with Norway, securing 2,000 jobs in the long term on the Clyde.
Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his advocacy for the Methil Yard? He and I meet often to discuss this, and it is good to see the investment that Navantia are putting into it. Not only in Scotland are we building the Type 26 frigates in Glasgow, the Type 31 frigates in Rosyth. I was pleased to be there for the steel cut on HMS Bulldog and the rollout of HMS Active only a few weeks ago. But I know that with the work that we've commissioned with the first Fleet Solid support ship being built by Navantia, I was present to see the steel cut in Appledore in North Devon at the end of last year. That's a bright future ahead for shipbuilding in Scotland, and I'm happy to continue my conversations with him about the Methil.
Sir Julian.
I have every sympathy with patriotic defence ministers who are being sent out to try to put a brave face on the fact that they are being undermined by their own Chancellor of the Exchequer. Yep. Isn't it a fact that someone as collegiate, experienced and patriotic as Lord Robertson would never have spoken out in the way that he has done if he did not recognise that the defence team, his party's defence team, are being undermined in this way? And if the threat from Russia is so great that NATO is now moved to 3.5% of GDP as its target, why does the government think that waiting another 9 years to achieve it is an appropriate way to deal with the killer in the Kremlin?
Well, can I thank the right honourable gentleman? And he's right. We've agreed the NATO target, and it is a NATO target of 3.5% on core defence, 1.5% on national security by 2035. We've agreed that, an important part of it. He will also know that the Defence Secretary revealed last week about the covert Russian activities. It is precisely because we can see more threats from Russia and other adversaries, not just against our undersea cables, that we're increasing defence spending, and we're trying to renew our armed forces, dealing with the hollowing out. I know that as a patriotic backbencher, as he now sits, he and I share many of the same views when it comes to the last government's effects of our armed forces, the hollowing out that we saw under the Conservatives. But I'm very happy to continue my conversation with him about how we can make the case for further defence investment.
Foster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree that we must understand what he inherited? A procurement system in the MOD in disarray, unfunded defence programmes, an Air Force without enough aircraft or helicopters, a Navy without enough ships, an army with Napoleonic low levels of troops. We're now facing wars in the Middle East and Ukraine. We are working with an exceptionally challenging situation, and we must get this right. Please do not allow the opposition to rewrite history. Thank you.
Well, first of all, can I thank my honourable friend for his service to the country, and the fact that he has served gives renewed credence to what he has just said. I'd certainly find it curious, Mr. Speaker, to see many of the people who delighted in cutting our armed forces over the last 14 years, now looking at saying that they want to increase defence spending without a hint of humility. I would find much more respect for the argument being made opposite if they stood up, first of all, to apologise for their cuts to our armed forces, and secondly, to apologise for their leader who described our brave pilots in the Middle East as just hanging around. I think our forces deserve better than the Conservatives, and they have it with this Labour government.
In room.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the words of Lord Robertson, we are underprepared, underinsured and under attack. We are not safe. Britain's national security and safety is in peril. I've asked over 6 times when the Defence Investment Plan will be published. I now know the answer. The answer is, we're working flat out. So could the Minister tell me in a time frame what and how long is working flat out?
Can I thank him for, as a Devon neighbour, I know his passion for our armed forces as well, and it's good to see him wearing his Royal College of Defence Studies tie, an institution that I'm proud to be a graduate of as well. He knows that we're working flat out to deliver the Defence Investment Plan, and we'll publish it when it's ready. I would much prefer to get it right than to publish a document that is not right, and that is what we are doing.
Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I remember defence investment under the last government. I was serving when our pay was cut, our defence housing was ruined, and equipment projects were cancelled and underfunded. In fact, it was under their government that our Navy warships were cut by 25%, our amphibious ships were mothballed, and our army fell to the smallest size for 200 years. Can the Minister tell us about the projects that we're doing to increase pay, to improve housing, and the effect that is having on recruitment and retention of our armed forces, so we can rebuild the numbers that were so hollowed out under the last government?
Well, can I also thank my friend for his service to our country as well. And it's interesting he mentioned recruitment, because indeed the Shadow Minister, when he sat on these benches during the last Parliament, was scathing about his own government's record on recruitment, scathing about their performance, scathing about their lack of action against the contractor they brought in. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that inflow is up under a Labour government, outflow is down under a Labour government. We've replaced the contractor, and we are delivering not only the biggest pay rise for our armed forces for 20 years, a second above inflation pay rise. We've ended the privatisation and the scandal of military homes that we inherited, with 9 in 10 military homes being refitted in the next decade. And we are putting effort into valuing our people by legislating for a new Armed Forces Commissioner, so our forces and their families can raise concerns outside the chain of command with someone independent. This is a government that is delivering for those who serve in uniform.
Tom Tugendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I say it's deeply unedifying to hear both the Minister and others playing political games with the matter of national security. Look, we can all look at the past. I can tell you about the body armour that I had to give over to somebody else for the invasion of Iraq because we didn't have enough in 2003. I can point to the underfunding of helicopters that meant that friends of mine were killed on operations in Afghanistan because they were underfunded under governments before his, but yes, wearing the same colour tie. We can all point to the past. The question for him is not what happened in the past, but what are you going to do about it in the future? The Defence Investment Plan, the Minister says, is not urgently needed because he's spending anyway. Well, why is he wasting his time in producing the damn thing? He could spare those civil servants to actually get contracts delivered instead of messing around with games, or actually put his heart behind the fight with the Treasury that needs to be had right now, as his own friend Lord Robertson has already made clear.
Well, I really like the Right Honourable Gentleman, actually. I think he's a very jovial chap, and he raises some good points. And let me say to him, the Defence Investment Plan is needed. It is being worked on by our department. We will be delivering it when it is ready, but we are not waiting for the Defence Investment Plan to make announcements. I've spoken about the £879 million contract I announced this morning in Andover for our Apaches and Chinook fleet, but I could also point to the announcement we made on Friday, a multi-million-pound deal with the veteran-led startup Cambridge Aerospace to provide new missiles to intercept drones, not just for our forces, but for our allies in the Middle East. So when he says we're looking to the future, we are exactly looking to the future, and that is why the Defence Investment Plan will set out the kit and capabilities that we need and will buy for the next 10 years, but also the upgrades that we're making to the kit we have today to give our fighting forces the edge. But importantly, it also talks about how we value our people, something that I don't think has been spoken about enough in defence for far too long, something else we're addressing.
Jane Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sitting on the Armed Forces Bill Committee, and we've heard terrible testimony about the state of military housing, and we've heard how it's already improving. So does the Minister agree that that $9 billion investment that we're making into military housing to deal with that botched privatisation can only be a good thing and raise morale of our troops?
Can I thank my more friend for her work, not just on armed forces housing as she raised here, but also she is a thorough champion for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, many of those ships that are in her Falmouth and Truro constituency. She's right to talk about the £9 billion commitment that we have made to deliver an improvement in armed forces housing. I see the front bench opposite is chattering. They had an option to deal with this when they're in power. They could have dealt with the black mould.
Please, I'm trying to hear as well, and it's not helpful.
Mr. Speaker, they could have dealt with the black mould in our armed forces kids' bedrooms. They could have dealt with the broken boilers and the leaky roofs. We have dealt with it as this Labour government, and I'm proud of that record. Also proud that we've refitted the 1,000 worst homes, delivering those improvements by Christmas, so our military families could be in a decent home by Christmas 2025, and now we're starting work on the next tranche of the worst homes, so our people can live in a decent home if they serve. That's the minimum we should offer those brave men and women who serve our forces.
I'll get you that. The honourable member for Tunbridge, in a plea that we just put this political blame game to one side, the fleet's halved under the previous Labour government. We all have our fingerprints on the current state of the UK military. It's unedifying of us, of this House, and of the state that we are in as a nation. Can I draw the Minister's attention to the APPG for rearmament, which I've recently set up with the honourable member for Macclesfield and for Spelthorne, who's longer in his place, and also Field Marshal the Lord David Richards in the other place. Our aims are to highlight the scale of the threat that we face, but also the parlous current state of the British military. Can I ask if he shares those aims with us? Because talking about both is necessary for this national conversation that was highlighted in the SDR that hasn't happened. Will he join us in talking about the threat, but also an honest depiction of the state of the UK military so that our public is informed and they can tell us what they would like us to do?
Thank him for his questions. I follow him on Twitter, so I'm very much keen to see the end of the political blame game of his tweets, and I look forward to seeing what he tweets next. That might be the embodiment of that spirit that we've just heard here. But he's right to talk about, especially munitions and the stockpiles that we inherited, far too low for the threat that we're facing. That's the reason why we have already made announcements about increasing the amount of munitions that we're buying for our armed forces. And he's also right to talk about the threat. The Defence Secretary from this dispatch box has spoken about the increasing threat that Russia in particular poses to the United Kingdom and our allies. We'll continue to do that. I'm very happy meeting him and his new all-party group to have that conversation, because I think it is an important one about how we address the underfunding and the hollowing out of our forces that we inherited. But also, I'll be able to help him understand the progress that we are now making under this Labour government to restock and to rearm, which is a lot of work done, but a lot of work still to do.
Lawrence Tuck.
Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister look at the sorry tale of Glenark Castle mess in Longbridge, Birmingham? This is armed forces accommodation, not from decades ago, but opened just in 2017 at a cost to the taxpayer of £36 million. It was built with 95% flammable external cladding, and now the fire defects within the accommodation have been judged to be so severe that the facility is going to be closed for up to a year at further great cost to the taxpayer. This was hopelessly mismanaged by the previous government. The Armed Forces personnel who work at the Royal Centre for Defence Medicine in Birmingham do an essential job. They deserve better.
I entirely agree with every word that my honourable friend has said there, and I know he's been assiduous in asking detailed parliamentary questions about the refurbishment and the refit of the Longbridge mess. I'm very happy meeting him to hear directly about the concerns of him and his constituents.
Well-placed sources are suggesting that the number of Type 26 hulls on the order book may be reduced or transferred to our Norwegian allies. Now, I appreciate that Labour has a track record in reducing the number of frigate and destroyer hulls, but nevertheless, will the Minister confirm that there are no such plans and that we will proceed with a minimum of 8 Type 26 frigates, particularly given the increase in Russian submarine activity discussed by his colleague, the Honourable Member for Selyoke, on Monday?
I can indeed, and he will know as a Defence Minister in the last government the state of the forces that he passed over to this government as well. But when it comes to frigates, which, Mr Speaker, I could bore the House on because it is one of my favourite subjects, he will also know that the deal that we've signed with Norway an incredible deal that sustains Type 26 production on the Clyde for many, many years to come, sees not only the 8 British Royal Navy Type 26s, but the 5 Norwegian ones. We're working with Norway on build slots currently, but that will create a combined force, a truly interoperable, interchangeable force. Indeed, the only things different between a Royal Navy and a Norwegian Type 26 will be the language on the signs. That is interchangeability. That is at the heart of the new defence agreement that we've signed with Norway, and part of an agreement about how we can work more closely with our JEF allies in Northern Europe, which I hope can be expanded to other nations as well as we look to sell the Type 31 frigates to more of our partners.
Tim Rocker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will have recognised the strength of feeling on all sides of the House to see the Defence Investment Plan published as soon as possible, and I hope Treasury Ministers share that understanding as well. I do think history is important, actually. When Russia annexed the Crimea, we saw no meaningful increase in defence spending. When Russia violated Minsk I, we saw no increase. When they violated Minsk II, we saw no increase. And when they launched a full-scale invasion of a sovereign European country, we saw no meaningful increase as well. So does the Minister agree with me that the debate about defence needs to be one that is constructive, hopefully cross-party, and that the country expects us to fund defence properly and urgently?
Can I thank him for the way that he asked his questions? And I noticed that the Shadow Minister was agreeing with every word that I think he said in relation to the cuts, also the lack of increase in defence spending. But can I recommend to him and to all colleagues in the House and Nessa the Right Honourable Gentleman's report when he was in charge of the Defence Select Committee are called Shifting the Goalposts, sets out the amount of GDP spend on defence going back a number of governments. It shows that the last Labour government left defence spending at 2.5% of GDP in 2010, a figure sadly never matched in the 14 years. We are getting back to 2.5% of GDP. April 2027 is when we will hit that, and we'll set out how we're spending that in the Defence Investment Plan. That will be published shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Successive UK governments have spent years cutting defence spending, reducing the size of our armed forces to record lows, dismantling our navy, slashing Scottish regiments and hollowing out investment in essential equipment and training. There is a continued refusal to join SAFE, even when Canada are joining, delays to the SDR, no certainty as to when the Defence Investment Plan will be released, and no urgency from the Prime Minister to act on the recommendations which make it clear that there is a £28 billion black hole in the existing plan. So what is the plan to deal with the Prime Minister's corrosive complacency, and how are Scottish voters supposed to trust this Labour government when, according to the SDR authors, they are failing so categorically to keep us safe and are threatening the security of Scotland?
Well, what I'd say to him is look at our record. A Type 26 deal that sustains shipbuilding on the Clyde, investment in a welding school in Scotland that we had to step in and fund because the SNP government chose not to. It's good that the SNP government has now finally realised that the defence of the realm is important, and I would ask him to pass on back to the SNP government that I'm still waiting for a proper reply to the offer to match fund a second Defence Technical Excellence College in Scotland. We want to have 2 in Scotland. We provided the funding for 1. I hope his government will match fund the second. I'm still waiting for a reply on that, and when that goes on, we're moving further and further away of more young Scots able to access the courses from September onwards that, if they agree to it, they could be doing.
Dr. Scott Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to be part of a government that is building ships in Scotland, whereas our Scottish Government colleagues are building ferries in Poland, Turkey and now China. Quite incredible. Mr. Speaker, you'll be very pleased to hear that I always use security guards at my surgeries. And the young chap who attended my surgery last year in Oxgang's library, he had just left Free Rifles. He said he left because he joined some years ago on the promise of travel and excitement, but he spent a lot of time in barracks because of the lack of funding in our armed services. The last time I visited Free Rifles, they'd just come back from Finland, and some were about to go back there to serve alongside our allies. Some were due to go to Iraq, but I understand that trip may not have happened, and they're all now better paid. Outside the barracks site, people can see the homes getting renovated. There's a little bit of jealousy about the quality of the kitchens, I have to say. And recently, just before the recess, I was able to give a tour from one of our defence primes to a young apprentice who lives in Balerno in Edinburgh South West. And she was very clear, this isn't an apprenticeship, it's not a job, it's a whole career before her because of the scale of what's happening in the sector. So when the Minister goes round defence establishments, when he goes round our defence contractors, what is the mood? Do they trust us to deliver against this budget commitment?
Can I thank him, and can I thank also the Armed Forces personnel that he spoke to and spoke about in his question there. We have a British Army that is currently globally deployed. I'm incredibly proud of, as I imagine, the whole houses of our forces that are deployed in Estonia as part of our forward land force, those forces that are deployed in Cyprus and across the Middle East in support of our allies, and those that are training and have been in support of our High North allies on various exercises. I don't ask our forces to comment on party political matters because they're there to serve the government of the day. But I do know that having them and their families live in homes without damp, mould, leaky roofs or broken boilers greatly improves their mood. And that is precisely why this government's delivering an upgrade to 9 in 10 service family accommodation in the next 10 years.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the challenges of tying defence expenditure to GDP is that the economy fluctuates. So when Labour crashed the economy in 2008, defence spending on GDP terms went up. So the reality is that as the economy fluctuates over the course of this Parliament and the next one, there could be a challenge in terms of actual defence spending. So as he looks at the defence investment plan, can he make sure that actually the level of expenditure continues to rise so that we actually get the investment in defence that we need?
Or, Mr. Speaker, it's a Liz Truss Claxon moment, isn't it? His memory is so brief that he has forgotten about what Liz Truss and the Conservatives did to our economy only a few years ago. But look, I agree with him that we need to increase defence spending. And let me say to him very clearly, there's not a single person in uniform today, not an admiral, a general, or anyone of any rank who has served in the UK Armed Forces with a decade ahead of increasing defence spending. That is such a sizable change when it comes to our armed forces spending. I noticed the chuntering from the front bench again, being grumpy that it is a Labour government that's increasing defence spending when his cut defence spending, but I will continue happily working cross-party in support of our armed forces.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When this government took office, it inherited an armed forces on its knees, and it responded to that challenge with the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War and a bold 10-year strategic defence review to make sure that we can have an armed forces that once again is able to protect our nation. That's why it's so important that we do get a defence investment plan as quickly as possible. And I've heard today from my honourable friend that he is as keen to get that out as quickly as possible, and that also it be the right plan as well. Can I simply take this opportunity to urge him to keep going so we can get that as soon as we can?
Can I thank him for not only his question, but also the work that he does. He is a quiet and determined champion for Sandhurst and those people that train in his constituency. And there is a real opportunity, I think, with the increasing defence investment that we are making to renew the facilities, not just in Sandhurst, but in the military accommodation, but in bases across the United Kingdom and further afield. And it's not just about infrastructure that we're increasing. I'm especially proud that I'm part of a government and a ministerial team with the Defence Secretary that is increasing support for childcare for those people who serve, because it is about our people, not just our equipment, that we should focus on. And that is what the Defence Investment Plan will do.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister accept and agree with the mood of the majority of the British people, and I think the mood of this House, which is to accelerate defence spending to 3% of GDP in this Parliament, not next Parliament? And can the Minister confirm that the year-long delayed defence investment plan will arrive before the summer holidays?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps if the honourable gentleman would like to give some of the money that his former Reform leader in Wales got from Russia to the defence budget, we'd have a wee bit more than we have today.
Sarah Dyke.
Mr. Speaker, Talis employs over 800 people, including 66 apprentices, on its site in Temple Combe in my constituency. Here they develop world-leading sonar systems for the Royal Navy's Astute and Dreadnought submarines, as well as delivering critical systems to enhance the UK security and defence. So given the training capability gap identified in the Strategic Defence Review, how will the Secretary of State increase funding for apprenticeships to ensure we address skills shortages?
Can I thank her for her question and also for calling out and celebrating the work of Talis and her constituency. I've visited a number of Talis sites recently and I've been impressed not just by the management but in particular about the apprentices who feel that there's a bright future ahead of them. She will know that we've announced that Yeovil is to be one of the 5 new Defence Technical Excellence Colleges, not too far from her constituency. That is a £10 million investment in each DTech designed to increase the number of places available for young people to take defence and defence-adjacent courses, supporting not just defence primes, but importantly the wider ecosystem of SMEs as well, because we recognise that by increasing defence spending, we not only want to bolster those large defence companies, but there's a huge opportunity to grow smaller defence SMEs as well, and addressing the skills challenges they have is a key part of that.
Stuart Anderson. Mr. Speaker, I have served on operations under both Conservative and Labour governments, and I can personally tell of horror stories of how I was treated, which led to 15+ years of complex PTSD. When I finally rebuilt my life, I wanted to see that nobody ever had to go through what I went through. So cross-party, as soon as I got here 6 years ago, I said that anything under 3% of defence spending in the last Parliament, when my government was in charge, I said that that was anything under was unacceptable. There is not a serious professional in the defence industry that thinks the current spending is adequate to meet the world's needs. Does the Minister think it's a serious investment that we're currently making at the moment?
Can I thank him for his question and also for being honest about the consequences of his time in service? It is so important that when any veteran who has served in our forces needs to be able to access help, that they know that help is available. And I think it is platforming and being honest about the experiences that enables more people to come forward. So I thank him for that. He's right that we need to increase defence spending. I want to increase defence spending. We have already increased defence spending, and by April 2027 we'll be spending 2.5% of GDP, 3% in the next Parliament. But I entirely appreciate how the honourable gentleman is making his remarks. I'm very happy talking to him. I'm sure the Minister for Veterans next door about his own experience, see if we can learn and help others in a similar situation.
National security depends on more than conventional defence spend, because our democracies can be brought down by methods other than weapons. And there are concerns that the public are not yet sufficiently aware about the risk and reality of foreign information manipulation and interference. So how does tackling this aspect of hybrid warfare feature in a cross-departmental way within his government?
Can I thank her for her question? She's absolutely right that we need to go beyond conventional defence. That's why we have conventional and nuclear deterrence as part of our armed forces posture. But she will also have heard in my opening remarks about the investment we're making in cyber as well. And so this is not just an MOD effort. Increasingly, if we are to deliver the national security that we need a whole of government approach. And that means the Ministry of Defence working with the Home Office, DCIT, Cabinet Office and the devolved governments to be able to tackle misinformation, to be able to tackle the deliberate misinformation that we see our adversaries trying to pump into our news feeds. Let me be very clear that we do not accept in any way the Russian interference or any interference in our democracy or in our way of life, but a national conversation that enables people to be better equipped to identify it, to be able to challenge it, and more pressure on social media companies to remove it and not have it on their platforms in the first place is the conversations that we're having across government.
Joel Pinkerton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Funnily enough, my question follows on perfectly on behalf of the previous member. Lord Robertson said that we are ill prepared for the threats of today, never mind tomorrow, and while Britain may not be under a daily attack from missiles and tanks, not yet anyway, we are under daily assault by mis and disinformation from hostile actors who are targeting our institutions, our democracy and our social cohesion. The Minister has already referred to the investments and operational changes that have been put into cyber and indeed electromagnetic security. But given the foundational nature of the challenge to our democracy, is he convinced that the Chancellor is convinced of the urgent need to make huge investments in this area? Because this is a challenge that we've never experienced before, a challenge that collapses the traditional idea of the front line with the home front.
Can I thank him for the way that he posed his question? And there's much that I agree with him in the way he did so. He's certainly right that we're not at war, but nor are we at peace. And certainly, if you look in a number of domains where we can see UK forces and UK infrastructure being attacked, the cyber domain being the most obvious of those. But as the Defence Secretary revealed only last week, the threats that we are seeing to our undersea infrastructure from the covert Russian activity, being able to call it out, being able to say to Putin, we see what you are doing, you will not have deniability. In fact, the military just call it denying deniability, which is a typical military phrase, but I think we all know what that means. But there's more to be done here. And I think the more that we can have the national conversation around the threats that we face and how all of us can, in our own way, take actions. Just updating your operating system on your phone makes you and the country safer. But there's lots more, especially in this House, that we can be doing to further support that. And I'm very happy having a conversation with him about how we do that.
Sir Julian Smith.
On this key recommendation of national conversation to build support and understanding amongst the population. It's all very well the debates here or debates in Whitehall, but what conversations is government having with the Department of Education, with the Department of Culture, the BBC, social media providers about the issues that are faced and the communication with the public to build support for funding and build understanding of the challenges we face?
Yeah, can I thank him for that question? It's a very fair one. So my colleague in the House of Lords, Lord Coker, is the Minister leading on the national conversation debate. And you will have seen, he will have seen, I'm sure, that he published the Defence Diplomacy Strategy recently. Although that deals with an element of kind of more traditional diplomacy, it also deals with the necessity to speak to our own people and our own wider populations around the threats we face and about how we respond to it. We're still at the early stages of forming the proposal for that formal national conversation. But again, that is one that has to be cross-government. That has to include the Cabinet Office. That has to include government departments that aren't just the Ministry of Defence, because how we defend our nation in the 21st century is not just about the brilliant men and women in uniform. It's about a whole of government and a whole of nation effort. And that's what we're trying to kickstart that conversation. But a debate around defence spending certainly contributes to that as well.
Brian Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the government considered issuing defence bonds, as proposed by the Liberal Democrats, to ring-fence capital for defence spending? And if not, why not?
Can I thank him for that proposal? I'm really interested in seeing the detail of the Lib Dem proposal about who pays for it ultimately. But he will know that following the publication of the Defence Investment Plan, we've made a commitment to publish the Defence Finance and Investment Strategy, which sets out how we can support not just businesses large and small, but how we can bring further investment into the sector. That will deal with everything from how do we stop small defence businesses being debanked, a real scandal and problem for small businesses as they seek to grow, but how can we leverage in some of the patient and venture capital that we are seeing potentially interested in defence to expand UK businesses, to support the development of capabilities, and that renews our own capabilities but provides export opportunity as well. So there's more work that we're doing in that regard.
Carl Locker.
Mr. Speaker, while most of the focus is often on munition and defence systems, what is the government doing to boost defence numbers and ensure our military are properly paid for the vital role that they do? For too long, our junior NCO ranks have been poorly paid, below average, and had poor living and working conditions. A defence network with adequate numbers and good morale is necessary complement for a well-equipped military.
Can I thank her for her question? I look forward to being in Northern Ireland next week for the announcement of the Northern Ireland Defence Growth Deal, which is the 5th of our 5 defence growth deals. I'm not allowed to say the total amount of investment, but we've announced 200 million of a £250 million pot, so the maths will hopefully give us some reassurance that there's a big announcement coming to her part of the world very shortly. But she's absolutely right to talk about the numbers, and so what we've done is not only address the problems with the recruitment and the system, especially the time of flight that took far too long between someone applying and then getting to a training establishment. We've introduced novel forms of entry, so the direct cyber entry is a really good example of that. Recruiting people for their cyber skills, not necessarily their skills being able to run around a muddy field with a big heavy backpack on, is a way that we're looking at new ways of getting the skills and the talent into our armed forces that we need.
Speaker, this month marks 20 years since I returned from serving on Operation Telex 7 in Iraq. And whilst I was there, we patrolled Basra in snatched Land Rovers. 34 British soldiers died in snatched Land Rovers. In 2006, it was highlighted to the previous government that they were unsuitable, and it wasn't until years later that they were replaced. So They were called mobile coffins and suicide wagons for a reason, and so I would exercise a little bit of caution about blaming previous governments for their defence inadequacies. I don't think any of the parties who've been in government in recent years have clean hands when it comes to scrutiny of those specific decisions. But the question I want to ask him was specifically about defence financing. We know that the Minister has announced that there's a £5 billion uplift for this year. Why is there therefore an exercise to exercise £3.5 billion of in-year savings, and how much of that is carried forward from last year's exercise to exercise £2.6 billion of in-year savings?
Can I thank him for his question and for his service as well? He sends me a lot of PQs in his role, but I recognise that comes from his service there. I can also very happy to confirm to the House that we are replacing our entire Land Rover fleet, and I was on Salisbury Plain only a few weeks ago making the announcement of the new replacement vehicle competition that I look forward to businesses coming in on. He will also be familiar with a business the size of 60 billion plus, which is the MOD budget. It's very normal to have in-year budget management. I'm not really understanding how surprising this is. If a £60 billion business didn't have in-year budget management, there'd be a real question about that. That's pretty normal business affairs. It was normal under his government. It's normal under this government as well. But we are increasing defence spending, £5 billion extra in our budget this year.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, defence spending is rising rapidly in China, in Russia, all over Europe, this country and the USA. And in every country in the world there is pressure on welfare budgets, and there is increasing levels of human and social inequality. And there is a global environmental disaster on the horizon. At the same time, the agencies for peace, such as the UN and its agencies, and overseas aid budgets are all being cut. Global inequality is getting worse. The conditions for future wars are being created. What plan does the government have to put some energy into a peace process led by the UN to try to bring a cessation to the dreadful conflicts that are going on around the world? Where is the investment for peace in the future? Or are we going to continue down the road of more on arms and less on the human needs of people?
Well, I might spend more of my time in the Ministry of Defence without my mobile phone in secure rooms, but I do know that he spends a lot of time in this chamber hearing from Foreign Office ministers about the work that we are undertaking in calling for a lasting peace, not just in Gaza, but also in the wider Middle East. We continue to do that. We continue to invest in that. The world is a more dangerous place every single day, and that is why we're increasing defence spending to deter aggression. Because the point of our armed forces is to deter that aggression and then only then defeat it if necessary. But he's right to say that the consequences of conflict is frequently felt by the most vulnerable. That is precisely why we're continuing to call for peace, not just in Ukraine, to end Putin's illegal war against that free and independent sovereign nation, but also to bring a lasting peace with a two-state solution in the Middle East, in Gaza and Israel as well.
Adam Downs.
Deputy Speaker, thanks to the tireless work by many in Leonardo, Yeovil, government and beyond, we got the new medium helicopter contract awarded and more investment in Yeovil, so thank you. But investment across the country is still held up without the Defence Industrial Plan. I know the Minister is working really hard to get the plan right, and I thank him for this. So can he set out what lessons have been learnt from the delays to the new medium helicopter and the DIP to make sure we fund defence procurement more effectively?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman's intervention on this one here. He will, I know, have welcomed not just the signing of the new medium helicopter contract, but the improvements we secured in it. I think it was frankly shocking that the Conservative deal that we inherited only had 8% UK content in the exports. We've increased that. He will also know that we've awarded Yeovil a Defence Technical Excellence College to support the skills needs of not just Leonardo, but the wider ecosystem. And he will also know, because I texted him yesterday, that the announcement that we have made in relation to the Boeing deal today, the £849 million for Chinook and Apaches, also includes investment in and support for jobs in his own Yeovil constituency as well. So we're continuing to invest in defence and continuing to invest in Yeovil as well.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Lord Robertson, the former Labour Defence Secretary, has said that we cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget. So will the Minister explain to my constituents why this government is able to set out its welfare spending plans until 2031, but can't publish its defence investment plan for 2026?
I thank him for his question. I don't think Britain gets stronger by pushing kids into poverty. That is the fundamental difference, I see it, between the welfare policies of our two different parties. And so I'm absolutely clear that we should be addressing the high levels of child poverty that we inherited from the last government. That's exactly the right things we should do. And he will also know, because I've said it a number of times, that we're working flat out to deliver the Defence Investment Plan, and it will be published when it's ready. I think he, on hindsight, would much prefer a plan that is ready to be published rather than one that is not. And that is why we're working to deliver our Defence Investment Plan. That will set out spending for the next 10 years up until 2036 or so.
Richard Ford.
Mr. Speaker, I entered this House months after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and I was struck at the time that the debate on Ukraine was solemn, dutiful and not party political. And the contrast with the debate over defence spending is stark. The Leader of the Opposition has decided to use it as a foil for her party, while the Honourable Member for Hackney North was on the radio last night saying that the Labour Party is not going to be helped electorally by an increase in defence spending. With Trump making threats about US commitment to NATO, does the Minister share my view that we need to link armed forces capabilities to the external threat rather than indulge in this party political navel-gazing?
I thank him for his question, and also in the spirit of my answers for his service as well to the nation. He's absolutely right that NATO is at the cornerstone of our defence. It benefits not just the United Kingdom, it benefits every single NATO member state, including the United States. And we are stronger when we stand together in relation to that. That's why we're delivering against the NATO target, delivering the new NATO regional plans, and why a debate that looks at how we can develop the latest capabilities, bring forward more skills into the sector, more investment, private sector investment into our defence companies is a good one for us. And we do this because it's in the national interest to support our national security. And that is why I stand at this dispatch box, not for party politics, but for our national security. And in darker times, that's why I hope all of us can be doing as well.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To listen to the Minister today, you might think that the dip matters very little, that we're cracking on regardless. But the truth, I think, is that the MOD has been outmanoeuvred by the Chancellor and the dip is pinned down by the Treasury. The dip matters a very great deal to industry because the demand signals that it will give allows industry to work up, whether it's from fighter jets to frigates, whether it's from bayonets to bullets. These items cannot just be pulled off the shelves. This dip matters rather more than I think the Minister is saying. Is that not the case?
Bang on.
I don't know where he's been for most of the question time, because I've been very clear, and he's trying to put words in my mouth, and I appreciate him giving it a good go, but he's not going to get away with that, I'm afraid, in relation to this. Look, we live in a new era of threat. I think he knows that as well. We are dealing with hollowed out and underfunded forces. I think privately he might not be able to put it in a soundbite, but he can concede that the state of the forces his government passed over to this Labour government isn't the one that I think perhaps in hindsight he would have liked. So we have to invest in our forces. We have to invest in new stockpiles. We have to invest in new technologies. We have to retire old kit and equipment that wouldn't work in Ukraine, that's unsuited to modern combat. And we have to do all of that at the same time, as well as addressing the defence housing crisis, the recruitment crisis, and the ever-falling morale. We've now stabilised morale in the armed forces. We have a plan to improve defence spending, to increase it, 5 billion extra in our budget, moving to 2.5, 3 and 3.5 as I've set out, but also a plan to invest in the latest technologies. I hope, in hindsight, he'll be able to welcome that investment, but I entirely understand why he has to have an attacky soundbite for his socials in the meantime.
Tim Farron.
Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing is more important to our national security than our nuclear deterrent. And we are massively proud in Westmoreland-Furness to provide the home for the Trident submarine programme. Not just massively proud, we recognise it is a grave responsibility, as it obviously is built in my honourable neighbour and friend's constituency. But our ability to build those submarines, to defend our country, depends on us being able to recruit and retain brilliant staff from around the country and beyond. And so the role of the local authority in this, in providing the housing, the services, absolutely crucial. Would he agree with me that there's been a complete disconnect, given that the local government settlement leaves Westmoreland-Furness Council with a 31% cut, massively hampering Barrow, Kendal, Penrith to be able to do the things we need to do to attract the people to keep our country safe? Will he have a word with the Chancellor and put that right?
Well, can I thank him for his advocacy for our independent nuclear deterrent? It was a shame that when his party was in power, the decision to renew the deterrent was delayed, and I know that he had strong views on it at the time. I'm also really proud that as the MP for Devonport, where our Vanguard-class submarines are refitted, that the people I represent make a material difference to the defence of our nation every day through their hard work in Devonport Dockyard. I met with representatives of Team Barrow on Monday when I was in Blackpool, talking about the new Defence Technical Excellence College that we've announced there that supports not only Blackpool and the Fylde, but also Barrow, Blackburn, Lancashire and a number of colleges, including Wirral Met as well. So I recognise that Defence is making the argument for skills and putting the money where our policy is by investing in it. He will know that that's an MHCLG question about local government funding, but let me tell him, to reassure him, that our commitment to Team Barrow is strong in the Ministry of Defence, and I'm very happy briefing him further on that if that may be useful for him.
Andrew George.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've listened carefully, and the Minister knows full well that committing to spend 3 or 3.5% tomorrow doesn't mean to say that the government can't commit to commissioning that expenditure now, because he's aware that the delivery pipeline can often take 5 to 10 years in any case, and therefore the Defence Investment Plan becomes vitally important. And he's evaded answering the question about when, but surely he can put a deadline date by which the Defence Investment Plan can be delivered, and in doing so, can he commit to ensuring that both RNAS Culdrose and the National Drone Centre in my constituency will see growth as a result of it? Thank you.
Or he's a wily member, Madam Deputy Speaker, and tried to ask the same question from a different angle. So I appreciate his effort there. He will know that we're working flat out to deliver the Defence Investment Plan, and we will publish it when it's ready. But as a fellow South West MP, let me say how important it is that we support not just the capabilities we have today, but the new capabilities. So not only with the National Centre for Marine Autonomy that we have in Plymouth, but also the incredible aerial drone facilities that we have across the peninsula, including in Cornwall. There's real opportunity to deliver that, and certainly the defence growth deal for Plymouth includes wider knock-on effects to the entire peninsula, and the LPIF bid secured from DCIT for our part of the world certainly provides support for the entire peninsula when it comes to development of new autonomy and drone technologies, which I hope will be accelerated even further in the future years ahead.
Minister.
As I referenced earlier in the week, Northern Ireland's geographical position means that increasingly it occupies a key geosecurity location, particularly in light of the threat to our transatlantic underground cables. In that context, will the strategic review deal with the situation revealed in a parliamentary reply that there are only 5 Royal Navy personnel based in Northern Ireland and only 70 RAF personnel? Surely if we're going to deal with the threats which are increasingly evident, we need to have a proper distribution and balance of personnel across the United Kingdom. And when he comes to Northern Ireland next week, maybe he'll bring some news in that regard.
Thank him for it. I noticed he didn't give the numbers out for the Army, which are considerably higher than the ones that he has suggested for the Navy and the Air Force. It's right that we distribute and allocate our force personnel against the mission taskings that they're given, but he's also right to talk about the key importance of protecting our undersea cables, including those that are in his part of the world. It is precisely for that reason that we're seeing more investment in those undersea, in the technologies that enable us to defend, monitor and protect those undersea cables much more. But as he will know, because we've met a number of times to talk about this, I want to see more investment in every single part of our United Kingdom, including in Northern Ireland, and I hope to bring him good news on that next week.
And the final question on the statement, Jim Shannon.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Looking forward to the good news. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers at them, for his positive TV interview this morning, which encourages all, and as a pretext to this question today. Well, the Minister announced the next stage of the Defence Growth Fund. No one doubts the Minister's commitment or his interest with regular visits to Northern Ireland for the defence sectors. It is so important that Northern Ireland can gain from the Defence Growth Fund incentive. and that Northern Ireland completes its own specific growth deal. When the Minister comes to Northern Ireland next week, can we expect a balance, and I think we all know what that figure is, of the Defence Growth Fund to be announced officially? It would do no harm, Minister, to announce that today.
He's tempting me, Madam Deputy Speaker. The opportunity in Northern Ireland is considerable for our defence industries, not just supporting large defence businesses like Thales, who produce the LMM missile in Belfast, but also, in particular in Northern Ireland, where we have a huge number of SMEs as well. I was with Boeing this morning announcing the new helicopter maintenance contract, and indeed Boeing have made a large investment in Northern Ireland as well. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to make the case that a career in defence, whether it is in uniform or a civilian role backing our forces, is not just a good job, it's a good, well-paid, decent job that can provide an entire career of opportunities. And I think the more that we can make that positive case for investment in both core defence industries, but also those industries that sit alongside defence, such as digital technologies, where there could be defence applications for that, that keeps us all safe and provides young people with good opportunities. And I look forward to speaking to him and Northern Ireland colleagues about that opportunity more very soon.
That concludes the statement. We now come to the presentation of bills. Presentation of Bill Freddie Van Mierlo.
Water Industry Act 1991 Amendment Payment of Fines Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 8th of May.
Friday, the 8th of May.
Thank you.
Presentation of Bill Sarah Dyke.
Food Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, the 8th of May.
Friday, the 8th of May. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the regular broadcast of news about creative arts and culture, to make provision about duties on the Secretary of State, Ofcom and certain broadcasters in relation to such broadcasts and for connected purposes. First, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me declare an interest. I'm a classically trained violinist who learnt at Beecham Music Group and benefited from a brilliant musical provision at Newent Community School. I'm also a guitarist, keyboardist and singer-songwriter who played in rock bands including Eyes of Eden, Never Home Club, 10 Second Star and the New Loafers. And unless you were going to gigs in the late 1990s in Gloucestershire, or you were listening to Radio 1 at one particular moment on one particular evening, you won't have heard of those bands. I want to ask members of this House, when was the last time you heard or saw news dedicated to culture or our brilliant creative arts? Of course, you will have seen dedicated coverage of a singular creative news story, but what about a bulletin that brings you regular updated coverage of cultural events happening both locally and nationally? Art exhibitions, concerts, orchestras, dance classes, art groups and choirs. So many great events are happening that we just don't hear about, due in part to irregular and fragmented news coverage. Yet we all know when the local football club down the road was relegated or hopefully indeed promoted. People might instinctively think that sport has an enormous audience, and of course it does. Well, millions of people attend theatres, galleries, concerts and cinemas every week as spectators. This is not a niche interest. It is a massive, underserved audience. Regular creative arts bulletins would serve that audience in the same way that sports bulletins serve sports fans. But there's another audience, Madam Deputy Speaker, beyond the spectators. The participants, young and old, in all genres, at all levels, professional and amateur, elite and perhaps most importantly, ordinary. Ordinary people participating in the creative arts are doing something extraordinary for themselves, their community and far beyond. A refrain heard all too often following the regular news programmes is, and now for the sports and weather. But what if we add one extra word? I hope that my bill might lead to the following phrase, and now for the sports, culture and the weather. It would be a small but important alteration to how we receive news, and the value we place on cultural events. My bill, in practice, would instruct ministers and responsible bodies such as Ofcom to engage with and ultimately, if necessary, require broadcasters who run regular news programmes to complement their sports news bulletins with a dedicated culture bulletin highlighting creative arts events and activities. By no means would this replace sports coverage or seek to replicate it, since, of course, sports have more competitions and leagues and therefore generate a certain type of interest and therefore news. It would simply level the playing field, if you excuse the pun. Or to put it another way, bring things into harmony, ensuring that everyone is playing in the same key. Now, thank you for laughing. I love sport. Indeed, I represent the constituency of rugby, probably the only place in the world where a sport was both born in and named after a town. It is important that sports news is broadcast. It is an important part of people's lives and promotes healthy lifestyles and much more. Regular sports bulletins in broadcast news normalise sport as an important part of community life. But there is no objective reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, why the same should not be done for the creative arts. I would argue that cultural news items are just as important a fixture in people's lives. After all, who doesn't listen to music, watch films, or appreciate artwork or poetry? Cultural institutions, theatres, cinemas, galleries and local venues, and not just physical venues, but also the numerous musical groups, such as brass bands, artists' groups, creative clubs in schools, colleges and universities, and in civil society, host newsworthy events every day. Yet there is no consistent, recognisable broadcast space where audiences can receive up-to-date creative arts news. This represents a clear gap in the current provision. Cultural events and the creative arts are a massive contributor to our economy. According to the House of Commons Library, in 2024, the latest year available, the creative industries generated 145.8 billion in gross value added, accounting for 5.5% of total UK GVA. In comparison, the sports industry generated 20.6 billion, or 0.8% of total UK GVA. Exports in 2021 include 9.1 billion in goods and 45.6 billion in services. Madam Deputy Speaker, the economic contribution is undeniable, but the benefits of promoting cultural news items go far beyond the economic. Creative arts engagement improves physical and mental health, cognitive function, recovery and social connection. A DCMS Commission report found Grade A evidence that arts engagement reduces depression, improves early years development, enhances mood and life satisfaction, and supports older people's cognitive and, importantly, physical health. Social prescribing shows a return of approximately £3 for every £1 invested. We often hear how sports participation improves discipline, teamwork and confidence. In essence, some important hard skills. But people often have the misconception that the creative arts are all about soft skills, or as I like to put it, sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya. Now, I've done that. It's lovely.
Don't do it now.
But it's not the only part, and I'm not going to do it now, as my honourable friend tries to induce me to do. If you learn an instrument or create a painting, it takes massive amounts of hard work. If you play in an orchestra or act in a play, that's discipline. So the creative arts are about soft and hard skills. And we're told that in this age of AI, we need creative thinkers. We're told that, aren't we? As well as those with hard skills. Increasing the visibility of cultural news would stimulate interest among the public in becoming a spectator, participant, or both. It would inspire people, especially young people, to engage in the right kind of AI, actual involvement. It would broaden the reach of creative arts to new and more diverse audiences. It would help stimulate local high streets and local economies and drive job creation, particularly in a sector where it's often too hard for artists to make a living, despite their talent and hard work. It would help the creative arts to strengthen community cohesion. And how would this work in practice? Madam Deputy Speaker, my bill would legislate for a central pool of news items that organisations can submit to from which regional and national broadcasters could source their stories. Ofcom would have a duty to amend the Broadcasting Code, and all public service broadcasters and others deemed by the Secretary of State to have a significant audience would be required to include regular cultural news bulletins. As part of my campaign, I have launched an online petition to gather support from the creative world, the creative industries and the general public. So don't just take my word for it. More than 250 organisations and individuals already back my idea. Creative arts bulletins featuring in all news broadcasts will elevate and normalise the creative arts, stimulate interest in schools, promote activities at both national and local levels, boost engagement and participation, and support town centre regeneration and economic growth. The bill does not require government spending. It does not subsidise the arts, although I obviously welcome more funding for the arts under this Labour government. It does not displace or denigrate sport. It simply ensures that creative arts and culture are given the visibility that they so deserve in our national conversation. We have the best creative arts in the world, Madam Deputy Speaker, and one of the most vibrant scenes at all levels of society, particularly in my constituency of Rugby. And the honourable members. It's time that more people heard about this, heard about what's going on nationally, regionally and locally. Madam Deputy Speaker, creative arts bulletins would help bring about the mind shift needed throughout society to normalise, celebrate and promote participation in the creative arts and help embed them ever more deeply in our national consciousness.
The honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Adam Jogi, Jess Brown-Fuller, Kat Eccles, Bambos Charlambus, Peter Princely, Dr Simon Ofer, Dr Becky Cooper, Jonathan Davies and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
John Slinger.
Creative Arts and Culture, Broadcasting Requirements Bill.
Second reading what day?
5th of June, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The 5th of June. Ways and Means motion. Minister to move. The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Programme motion to be moved formally.
I move formally.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.